Salutations, and welcome to the long-awaited second installment of my Halo Mod Showcase series, where I show off modded Halo content outside of the realm of Halo Custom Edition. If you have any suggestions of Halo mods that you'd like to see, leave them in the comment section below and I'll consider the idea for a future episode. For today's installment, we're going to a somewhat unexpected Halo game. Halo Wars 2 has had a small history with modded content going back to shortly after the game released in early 2017, with Game Cheat 13 providing an example with modified AI battles that have a drastically increased scale by including more units than the base game supports and increasing the unit's range. However, the mod that we'll be covering today is Blackandfan's Halo Wars 2 Overhaul mod. Blackandfan's also responsible for the More Leaders mod for Halo Wars Definitive Edition, which I may cover in a future video. Keep in mind that this mod is still a work in progress, so everything that you'll see in this video is subject to change. Before I dive into the mod itself, I'd actually like to give a brief tutorial on how to install Halo Wars 2 mods just like this one. Blackandfan has a written tutorial on his website, but I haven't seen anyone make a tutorial video on the subject, so I thought I might as well include one since Halo Wars 2 modding as a concept is practically unknown to most of the community. Playing Halo Wars 2 mods is only possible on the PC version of the game, not on console. In the following gameplay footage, I'm using an Xbox 360 controller on my PC as I'm used to playing Halo Wars with a gamepad. I wanted to say this to avoid any confusion. Next, you're going to need quite a bit of space on your computer as we're essentially going to be working with 2 copies of the game. I recommend 100 gigs of free space at the very least just to be on the safe side. You're also going to need to download the UWP dumper that's linked on Blackandfan's tutorial page. This is what we'll be using to make the second copy of Halo Wars 2 that will end up being modified. Lastly, you're going to want to put your computer in developer mode so that you're able to properly load this modified copy of Halo Wars 2. On Windows 10, you go to Settings, Update and Security, for Developers, and click on the Developer Mode option. First, if you haven't already, go to the Windows Store and install Halo Wars 2 on your PC. Depending on your internet connection, this may take a while considering it's almost a 50GB download. Once it's finished downloading, launch Halo Wars 2 and keep it running in the main menu. This is important. Now, Alt-tab out of the game and head on over to where you place the UWD dumper files. Then run the UWP injector that was included in the download. In this section, you're going to want to find Halo Wars 2's process. To the left of it, there's a set of green numbers that will be different for you than what they are currently on my screen. Where it says Enter Process ID on the bottom of the application, type in whatever numbers you have that are next to your Halo Wars 2 process, then click Enter. This will start making the second copy of the game, but just know that this will take well over half an hour to complete, so be patient. Once that's done, the location of your dumped copy will pop up on your screen. Simply drag the dump folder out of its current location and move it anywhere you'd like. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to move it to my desktop. Now you're going to want to uninstall the original copy of Halo Wars 2 since it'll get in the way when trying to play our modded copy. Inside the dump folder, you're going to look for 2 files, one called appxblockmap.xml and another called appxsignature.p7x. Delete those 2 files. Download the Halo Wars 2 Overhaul mod if you haven't already done so, and move all the files within that folder to the dump folder. It will ask you if you want to replace any files. Click yes to all of it. Lastly, run install overhaulmod.bat. Wait a few moments, and that's it. You've successfully installed the mod that will be featured in today's video. Online multiplayer isn't available with this mod just yet, so your only options to play versus opponents of any kind are through skirmish matches versus the AI and solo terminus firefight. Lastly, and this is very important, you must have the Awakening the Nightmare DLC in order to play this mod, otherwise you won't be able to access it. The Halo Wars 2 Overhaul mod aims to include new playable leaders into the game as well as revamp existing leaders to either make them more unique compared to the rest of the cast, or simply make them stronger than they already are. Some of these revamps include cutting some of the leaders and infusing their traits into others. Meanwhile, in the current build there are 3 brand new leaders that are added to the roster. One is a Sentinel leader, and the other are 2 Flood leaders. First, we're going to be going over the already existing Halo Wars 2 leaders that have received significant changes to their units, leader powers, etc. We'll start with Captain Cutter. Both Cansano and Isabel are no longer usable in this mod, but many of their traits have been fused with Cutter's, so he essentially plays like a fusion of himself, Isabel, and Cansano. Right off the bat, his starting units have been upgraded from 2 Marines to 2 ODSTs, and Cutter now has the ability to train more ODSTs from his main base. The ODSTs are better than the Marines in almost every way except for the fact that he can't heal vehicles, aircraft, and buildings via combat tech. Their main niche, however, is their access to a Y ability, which is a grenade toss, at the very start of the game. Cutter also has the ability to train 3 Spartans from the armory as opposed to just 1. mirroring the first Halo Wars game. They start out with dual pistols like the original Jerome unit. On their first upgrade, they each receive a suppressed SMG. On the second, they dual wield the suppressed SMGs, and the last upgrade gives their dual SMGs a blue laser sight, which indicates that they've become stronger than before. Cutter has also received brand new units that are unique to this mod. Instead of normal Warthogs, Cutter has access to Kinsano's Flame Hogs. His Scorpion tanks have been modified to receive a new Coaxial Flamethrower, as well as the small missile launchers used on Forge's Grizzlies. Cutter also gained a brand new variant of Serena's Frost Raven, only instead of firing a stream of ice, it has a flamethrower turret. It feels a unique niche in the game as one of the only air units that has a good matchup against infantry. I personally like to call it the Dragon, but it's officially called the Flame Raven by the mod's creator. Cutter even received a new super unit unique to him in this mod. Now he can call in the Pelican gunship as a usable unit, the same one used for close air support and various UNSC unit drops. It's very strong with its heavy machine guns and missile launchers, and has considerable range much like the Condor. The leader powers, however, are where Cutter received the most notable changes. Some of both Isabel and Kinsano's leader powers have been incorporated into Cutter's toolkit, and these include Heat of Battle and Holographic Decoy in Tier 1, Hell Drop in Tier 2, Mac Blast in Tier 3, and the Best Offense and Inferno in Tier 4. The upgrades for his new Mac Blast in particular have been significantly altered. Mac Blast 1 fires a single round, but Mac Blast 2 fires 2 rounds, and Mac Blast 3 fires 4 rounds, making this leader power one of the strongest options for the new Cutter. This method of upgrading the Mac Blast somewhat harkens back to the original Halo Wars, where the player can also fire up to 4 Mac rounds. The ODST drop has also received a major change. Instead of dropping in just one squad, the player can now drop in 6 squads at a time, making the power much more desirable to purchase. All it's missing is the
hell jumpers, standing down.
The last major change to Cutter's leader power roster is the ODST Assault Group. In this build, you can call in Sunray 1-1 from Operation Spearbreaker. This squad of ODSTs is excellent for its ability to self-heal, as well as its Y ability, which stuns mechanized units in place. This squad can also be revived if it goes down, much like in the campaign. Professor Anders is the next leader that has received major changes to her toolkit. To harken back to Halo Wars 1 where Anders' signature ability was the Cryo Bomb, Serena lends most of her cryotech to her, along with a couple of brand new tools exclusive to the mod. Instead of standard Hellbringers, Anders gets access to Serena's Cryo Troopers, but her main new unit is the Cryo Scorpion, which has access to a Coaxial Ice Beam turret much like the Frost Ravens. When you build enough of these tanks, they become so potent they can freeze just about anything in seconds. Her hero unit is Serena's Bison instead of Douglas. Her new leader power options include Ice Barrier in Tier 1, Cryo Bomb in Tier 2, Cryotech Advances and Glacial Storm in Tier 3, and Cryo Drop in Tier 5. There are 2 new leader power upgrades that were introduced to Anders. The Protector Sentinel leader power now has an upgrade that grants you access to the Frost Raven. Meanwhile, Sentinel Beacon is upgraded by purchasing the new upgrade for Cryotech Advances. The fact that Anders now has access to both Cryotech Advances and Sentinel Beacon is a major boon for her. The way it's incorporated in the current build of the mod is that when both powers are unlocked, her Kodiaks receives both the attributes. However, the Siege Turret shells only have the cryogenic firepower. Sergeant Johnson is the last UNSC leader that we'll be going over today. In this mod, Jerome lends some of his inspiration tools to Johnson, and it makes sense considering who Johnson is and how influential he's been throughout the course of the Human Covenant War. While he didn't receive brand new units like the Cryo and Flame Scorpions, he's now able to train standard Scorpions in the garage, and this is interesting because Johnson actually has a line of dialogue relating to the Scorpion that goes unused in the regular version of Halo Wars 2.
Canister shell researched.
Despite the inclusion of the Scorpions, Johnson still has access to his signature Colossus mechs, but they're now trained in the Armory instead. In this mod, the Colossus has received a buff to its HP and now costs 10 population points, 1000 supplies, and 1000 power. As for his new leader powers from Jerome, Johnson now has access to Time for Heroes in Tier 2, Spartan Morale in Tier 4, and Omega Team in Tier 5. Utilizing the combination of Omega Team's inspiration auras with the Cyclops, Mantis, and Colossus units, as well as Johnson himself, makes for an incredibly powerful combination as it can benefit from both Spartan morale and mech overcharge during intense firefights. Moving on to the existing Banished leaders that receive significant alterations, we now have the Banished leader himself, Atriox. He and Decimus joined forces to create a new Atriox that is both offensively and economically powerful. The union between these two brutes is only solidified further with the addition of the Warlord and Decimus himself being usable heroes alongside Atriox's Chosen. In this mod, you could spot up to 4 Warlords, but they're much weaker than the one Decimus has in standard play. Atriox's new leader powers include Killing Frenzy in Tier 1, Fury in Tier 2, Boundless Siphon in Tier 4, and the Decimus Drop in Tier 5. The last existing leader to have fundamentally changed by a significant amount is Colony. Voridus and Pavium gifted Colony with a bunch of new tools to ultimately craft a leader that'd be considered the king of the turtles if it were in standard play. Voridus' unique units, which are the Brute Grenadiers, the Infused Engineer, and the Volatile Scarab, are now options for Colony to train. The scariest aspect of Colony's Volatile Scarab is that skitterers can attach themselves to it to make the super unit even tankier than it was before, and provide a very small amount of extra damage output when they shoot the same target that the Scarab is firing at. And the Combat Repair leader power continuously heals a Volatile Scarab if it has taken damage. Combine these traits with the fact that the Volatile Scarab is already stronger than the regular Scarab, and we essentially have the single strongest super unit in the game by a wide margin, at least in my opinion. Meanwhile, Pavium lends two of his leader powers to Colony, which are the Mega Turrets in Tier 1 and the Lich Vanguard in Tier 4. Colony was already extremely powerful when it came to defensive play, and the Mega Turrets only make Colony's defensive prowess that much stronger. The Arbiter gained a new pseudo-hero unit in the form of the Shipmaster's Honor Guard. It now no longer takes up a hero unit slot and instead only takes up 8 population points. These new Honor Guards are strictly anti-infantry and anti-building units now. Against enemy units, they use a carbine much like the Elite Rangers, but when they attack buildings, they use energy swords. The other leader to receive a small change was Yap Yap the Destroyer, who gained a new starting unit in the form of a modified Locust that has a Shade Turret instead of the standard focus cannons that the normal variants have. The Shade Locust makes for a great starting unit for Yap Yap because unlike the standard Locust, it can capture resources and secure power nodes, and it can accomplish both of these tasks at a much faster rate than the cannon fodder grunts. Now we're going to go to the new leaders. First, we have the Sentinel leader. It primarily uses the Sentinel based units and abilities that Professor Anders has access to in standard play, along with a couple of new units thrown into the mix. At the start of the game, the Sentinel leader can purchase the Aggressor Sentinels, the same ones that guard the power nodes, at the main base. However, this leader actually starts off with a modified version of the Elite Enforcer squad that lacks a Plasma Caster user, and can purchase a similarly nerfed Brute Grenadier that only has 1 Brute per purchase instead of 2 in a squad. These few aspects are only a taste of the diversity of the Sentinel leader's units and leader power selections have, with its access to both UNSC and banished forces and abilities. Some of these actually make sense given the context of the lore. The healer units for this leader are Engineers, which are canonically Forerunner creations. The Controller Sentinel is a Sentinel leader's hero unit from the Operation Spearbreaker mini-campaign. While it doesn't have a Y ability nor does it have any upgrades at this time, its main niche comes with its extremely tough energy shield that reduces the damage it takes to only 10% of what it normally take. This allows it to play as a distraction for opposing units that are forced to move behind it to attack its shield's weak spot in the back. To deter enemies from walking close to it, the Controller Sentinel has access to its heavy Sentinel beam that fires underneath it, and it has a very wide area of effect to hit as many enemies as possible. The other unique aspect of this leader is its access to units that are normally exclusive to the Blitz game mode, such as the Armored Warthog, the Lockdown Scorpion, and the Ironclad Hunters. While the Blitz effects for these units haven't been transferred over, they receive their own special attributes for standard multiplayer. The Warthog and Scorpion units gained energy shielding, while the Hunters now have 2 firing modes. Against ground targets, they use the Beam Cannon, but now they can use their standard fuel rods to attack air units. Lastly, the Retriever Sentinel was removed from Anders' armory and now has become an exclusive super unit for the Sentinel leader. Saving the best for last, we have the 2 Flood leaders. As many of you already know, the Flood are a parasitic faction in the Halo universe that specialize in taking over the bodies of sentient beings and using them against their former comrades. In Halo Wars 2's Awakening the Nightmare campaign, we see that aspect in full force, and within the Halo Wars 2 Overhaul mod, the player now has control over this power. Both Flood leaders have access to the same Flood forms that specialize in infecting various units, as well as using the same process to build Flood bases. The Infection forms are designed to take on infantry units, the Infestor forms ravage enemy vehicles, and the Airborne Cedar forms infect air units. The Flood have their own hero units in the form of the Spawners, where they'll automatically train a unit that counters the one that the spawner is attacking. In multiplayer, these hero units are also able to use active camouflage as their Y ability, which aids in protecting themselves while they produce more units. Lastly, in terms of pure Flood units, there's the Abomination. These units are extremely powerful super units, using their long tendrils to slam enemy units and buildings to a pulp. The way the Flood leaders acquire new tech levels is unique. With each new Flood base built, the Flood leaders will receive a new tech level. This could be done by converting mini bases to Flood bases. These Flood mini bases come with 2 small Flood pods that automatically produce supplies, as well as a small Flood spawner that pumps out Flood units that counter the enemies attacking the base. These mini bases can be upgraded once to increase your population limit by 10 points. Am I supposed to blur this out? Will this give me the yellow magic? You can also upgrade the pure forms of the mini base, and each upgrade buffs their attack power and HP. A key aspect that's unique to these 2 Flood leaders is their starting base already having access to floodified versions of the barracks, garage, air pad, and armory at the very beginning of the game, as well as various appendages that act as the turret slots. The armory in particular is something to pay attention to because from there, the player can purchase various hero units, such as members of Omega Team if the UNSC Flood leader is chosen, or Pavium and Arbiter if using the Banished variant. While it sounds incredibly broken that the Flood leaders gain access to so much at the start of the game, there's a catch. The Flood versions of these buildings cannot be rebuilt if they're destroyed unless you rebuild the entire base from scratch. So taking these buildings out as soon as possible is a great way to cripple unit production for the Flood leaders. Just note that if you decide to play Terminus Firefight while playing as the Flood, you'll need to self-destruct your main base and rebuild it as it won't start off as a floodified base. Luckily, you can immediately build the 2 mini bases that are located next to your main base, as that will not only count as a base slot, but you'll start generating supplies thanks to the Flood pods that they come with. As mentioned earlier, there are 2 Flood leaders in this mod, one that focuses on Banished forces and the other for UNSC. The Banished Flood leader offers a more offensive playstyle given the context of its leader powers. In Tier 1, it gets Decimus's Killing Frenzy and Atriox's Dying Breath. In Tier 2, it gets Voridus' Combat Spoils, as well as a modified Voridus Pack Assault that drops in 2 stationary Flood spawners that are the same kind attached to the mini bases. In Tier 3, it gets Teleport and a modified Voridus Pack Assault 2, where it calls in an Assault Pelican that drops off a large combination of UNSC and Banished combat forms. In Tier 4, it gains Boundless Siphon and Enduring Will. And in Tier 5, the Banished Flood leader receives 2 brand new powers. One calls in an Abomination with 3 Veteracy stars, and the other calls in a squadron of Flood Banshees that fly in a circular formation and attack everything in its radius. There is a glaring issue with the Banished leader compared to the UNSC variant. It has no healer units, meaning it has to rely on Boundless Siphon and Enduring Will if it wants to heal its units. You can also spawn in a Flood-controlled Pavium from the War Council to heal your buildings, but they can't heal your units. This means that the way to power on through with the Banished Flood leader is to use a hyper-offensive playstyle, constantly barraging your opponents with no regard to the well-being of your existing units while training new ones in the process. The Banished leader is the only one of the 2 that can upgrade its bases to access different units, with the main one being the Wraith Invader. The Wraith Invader, a mobile garrison unit, is something the Banished Flood leader has over the UNSC Flood leader, which does not have access to the Macedon. Lastly, it also gets access to Yap Yap's new Shade Locust, only this time a Flood Grunt is piloting it. The last leader that we'll be going over today is the UNSC Flood leader. Unlike its Banished counterpart, it offers much more defensive utility thanks to the inclusion of actual healers in the form of Nightingales in the air pad, as well as access to more supportive leader powers. In Tier 1, it gets Vortex Lightning and a new Infection Form unit drop. In Tier 2, it has Pelican Transport and a unit drop that calls in 3 veteran Flame Hogs. In Tier 3, it gets Enduring Will and Arbiter Stasis. In Tier 4, it gets Displacement and Siphon, and in Tier 5, it gets the Abomination drop and Mass Cloaking. Along with the access to Nightingales, for hero units it gets to call in any of the 3 members of Omega Team. They come with their Aura of Inspiration along with their ability to commandeer your vehicles and air units. Within the armory, you can also call in both the Flame Scorpion and the Cryo Scorpion, as well as the Flame Raven. The UNSC Flood leader is also my ideal choice for Terminus Firefight of the 2 Flood leaders for a multitude of reasons. First, as mentioned earlier, it has access to Nightingales, which is supremely important for healing units and barricades. Second, you can call in bunker barricades to extend map vision and enable various infantry units to garrison themselves into them, such as Omega Team Flood and Flood Snipers. Next, its leader powers in general just fit the defensive playstyle of Terminus Firefight a lot more than the Banished's mostly offensive version. Lastly, siege turrets can be built on the turret pads, which are easily the best turrets to use for this game mode. And the UNSC Flood leader can combine those with Kodiaks to form an impressive column of artillery. And that's going to be the end of this video. If, and only if, you like what you saw, hit the like button and subscribe for more Halo content on this channel. Make sure to hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload a new video. Make sure to follow me on Twitter and join my Discord server as well, and I'm actually going back to being more active on my Twitch channel from here on out, so follow me there and to catch up on my latest streams. I plan to stream some gameplay of this mod on Twitch shortly after this video goes live, so stay tuned for that. Lastly, please support Blackandfan in any way you can. He deserves a ton of praise for his work on this Halo Wars 2 Overhaul mod, and the modding community surrounding this game could use more hands as there's a really small group of people that make up the modding scene for this game. I'll be leaving links to his website, his YouTube channel, and his Discord server where you can download the mod yourselves. This is the Eventual Vadim, and I'll see you on the great journey.